Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I hope you've had the most exciting, incredible time. I hope you've spoken to the person next to you and behind you in the queue for lunch. I hope you've had a go, maybe. You've test-driven one of the fabulous cars. You've been in the igloo, virtual reality, walking the plank. There's so much more. And even when we finished here, there's still a chance to network, grab yourself a drink, have a go at these things. And maybe there's an area that you haven't wandered into yet, and you must, because if you think of all the minds, creative, inventors, innovative brilliance under one roof, it would be crazy not to make the most of today and to squeeze everything out of it that we possibly can. Now, I'm really excited, and I'm sure you are, about the next guest. She has great humour, authority and style, and we know her, I think, from different points throughout the years. So many different programmes, whether it's Tomorrow's World or Bang Goes the Theory. We're talking about the fantastic lady that was awarded an OBE in the New Year's Honours List to her services for science, technology and engineering community. She has done so much for women as well, and I salute her for that. Please put your hands together for Maggie Philbin OBE, please.
Thank you very much. And I feel absolutely gutted that I have missed some of the speakers at this event, because I don't think I've ever looked down a list of presentations that I've more wanted to, have been present to see. So I'm very much hoping to catch up afterwards and find out a little bit more detail. I am aware that this is how most of you will know me, from my years on the telly and a range of ever more bonkers hairstyles. They always seem completely fine at the time, and then when I share them with my daughter, she's quite appalled. And now I lead an organisation called Teen Tech, and as the name might imply, we're helping young people understand the opportunities in tomorrow's world, because it wasn't until I started work on that show that I had any idea about the amazing range of opportunities and the many very, very different people who worked in those areas. But in terms of innovation, I feel that I worked on the programme at a very interesting time, because the 80s really saw the arrival of a lot of digital tech. And I demonstrated the very first digital camera, incredibly without the camera itself, because that was stuck in customs somewhere. So I had to demonstrate the principle of the digital camera and say, it's amazing, you can get 36 pictures on this tiny disc. It's just incredible when I sort of like think back on it now. This is me demonstrating virtual reality in 1986, and I can assure you it bore no resemblance to the wonderful demo that you've got in the foyer today. I will absolutely put my hands up to the fact that when I tried this out and pushed this enormous machine around a sort of a set in Leicester, I could not imagine how on earth you would actually use it. And so it's been one of those technologies which I've really enjoyed following through. Right, okay, let me just go back one. Can I go back? Can I go back? That's it, yeah. So these are some of the pieces of tech that I showed for the very first time on Tomorrow's World. And I do actually sometimes need to remind myself when I get excited about it that I didn't actually invent them, I was only showing them. It would have been lovely had I been the inventor. But the thing that was really fascinating in retrospect was to see the convergence of all of these pieces of technology. Because we always used to talk on Tomorrow's World about how one day you'll have a computer in your pocket. And of course we do have a computer in our pocket, but I could never imagine that it could have possibly been a mobile phone, because that is obviously what the mobile phone of the late 80s looked like. And I showed it to a group of teenagers recently, and I asked them what they would be prepared to pay for a mobile phone that gave you 30 minutes talk time, and that you couldn't send texts, you couldn't make videos on it, and you certainly couldn't receive emails. And I think the highest bid we got up to was 15 quid, and that was very grudging, and they said they wouldn't really pay it. And of course that cost £3,000. So when I held that phone at the very first mobile phone conference, I never imagined that I would ever have a mobile phone either. So, you know, all of this technology was obviously very exciting, and it gave me obviously a fair deal of insight into what I started to believe the real nature of technology was. So whereas on the one hand it was really fascinating to understand why a piece of tech might come into being at a particular time. So for instance, you know, why after thousands of years of drinking tea was the tea bag invented in the sort of mid-19th century? Why, when we'd had the wheel for, you know, let's say 4,000 years BC, and the suitcase from the 19th century, did it take until 1970 for someone to think, do you know what, it'd be such a good idea to put wheels on a suitcase? So that side of innovation really fascinated me, the collision of different areas of thought. And it's something which I think is really important, because Steve Jobs often used to refer to joining the dots in terms of innovation. And I think it's something to bear in mind that often when you're innovating, the idea that could really change your sector may have nothing to do with your sector. It may be outside, which is why it's really important not only to go to the events that everybody else goes to, but to go to all sorts of events, because that's where you'll get the killer idea. And the most important thing really is that tech is not about widgets. Technology is all about people and making life better, simpler and easier for everyone. And it's about taking a fresh look at the world and seeing how you can make things better. And this, you may recognise, is Oxford Circus. And for many years, if you were trying to get from one part of Oxford Street to Regent Street, you had to do this complicated thing of crossing several roads. And it's only very recently that Atkins developed that sort of pedestrian area, so you could just take diagonal routes easily and safely to cross to the other side of the street. I don't know whether you know Deborah Leary. She was married to someone who worked for the police. And so she went to a police conference in Canada. You know, she has nothing to do with forensics whatsoever. And she said that she was at this event and at a sort of drink stew and making polite conversation and trying to find, you know, something in common with the various people there. And she started talking about crime scene stepping plates with someone. And she said while this bloke was talking, she was building up an image of, well, what would a crime scene stepping plate look like? And he outlined some of the issues that they had, that they frequently covered up evidence so that police could be accused of, you know, deliberately, you know, compromising a crime scene. And so what she invented were these see-through crime stepping plates. And as I say, that it just took a fresh look from an outsider. And so much innovation happens in that way. I mean, when Martha Lane Fox set up lastminute.com, she knew absolutely nothing about travel, but she did know about this new thing called the internet that she felt could make a real difference. And PayPal wasn't developed by the banking industry. Again, that was by people who could see a tech solution to an old problem. So one of the things which I think is really important about innovation is making it easy for people to innovate. Because everyone potentially can make a really big difference, because everyone does see things differently. And sometimes within an organisation, certain people are allowed to be the innovators and certain people aren't. And sometimes that means that you miss out on insight, because people working in certain areas of your business really understand what needs to change to make things better, simpler, or easier. And an innovator can be anyone. An innovator, it doesn't matter whether you are 6 years old or 96 years old. You know, you have an experience of the world which is your own, and you can really make a big difference. So this young girl was in hospital for a long time, and while she was there, she was thinking, it's really crazy, I have to keep dragging all of these drips around, it's really difficult. And so at 11 years old, a couple of years after she came out of hospital, she developed a backpack that all of those IV lines could go in. A really neat idea. And then this idea was one of our teen tech students who suffers from narcolepsy. And she found car travel, in fact, any kind of travel, really difficult. And so she developed a new kind of car seat that would just support her so that when she suddenly fell asleep, she wasn't just jerking and having a very uncomfortable experience. Now, one of the things, and I know that you will have been talking about it today, is, you know, the magic word data. And it's something that we talk to young people a lot, trying to help them understand the real impact that understanding data can make on any kind of scale. And I think sometimes it's very tempting to think, right, well, if we're going to do this, we need to bring in the very best data scientists, data analysts. But actually what's most important is having people who really understand what you're trying to do. So they may not necessarily be experts, but they may be willing to learn, and helping them understand what they can do to interpret the data, I think, is just as important as bringing those people with those high-level skills in to interpret it. So thinking about what you might do to understand areas of what you're already doing so that you can change them, and having an outline for that plan, I think, is a good thing to think about. This is an example that we often show to young people to illustrate what data can do. So when people were able to use their mobile phones on the underground, this provided a great opportunity for TfL to understand the routes that people were taking. Because previously they knew where people got on the tube and they knew where they got off, but they didn't know the different routes that they took. And so out of interest, they mapped how many different routes people took between Euston and Waterloo. And it was, you know, quite a revelation to them. I have to say, when you look at some of the routes that some people are taking between those two stations, they are absolutely incomprehensible. And you can't imagine why anyone would want to go that distance. But that was very useful for TfL to know, because in terms of the way that they manage sort of passenger traffic and rush hour situations, that was very helpful. The other example I often use is one from the music industry, and if you are interested in music, you'll know how much it's changed. And at one time it was all about how many albums you sold, and now it's not by selling, you know, your music that you make your money, it's by live performances. So this picture is my son-in-law. He's in a band called White Lies, as you might have guessed from the screen behind. They've been very successful. They've had a #1 album, a #3 album, a #5 album. I'm very proud of him. But I was amazed when one day I was sort of chatting and the drummer sort of pulled out his phone and he said, do you know, at any one time, I've got this app and I can see who's buying our music, how old they are, roughly, where they are, which country they're in, sometimes what gender they are. And that is obviously hugely important to a band, because it means that when they're planning where to go, they've got a sense of where their audience might be, which means that you're playing to audiences on this kind of a scale and not to 25 people in the back room of a pub, which was actually where they started, except it was probably 5 people, and that included me and Harry's parents when they first got going. I think one example of what data can do that really, really rammed it home to me was the journey that these two innovators had with a company that they set up called Hassel. So originally Hassel was called Teddle, and the two women essentially wanted to provide a one-stop shop so that if you wanted to find a music teacher, lots of music teachers, they noticed, put notices in cafes, and that was fine if you happened to use the cafe, but otherwise you would never know there was a brilliant music teacher, perhaps within, a 5-mile radius of where you live. So they set a website up that enabled you to connect with lots of people who provided all of these services. And it was so-so. And then one of their mates, who was keen on data, said, have you ever analysed what people are doing on your website? Do you know what they're coming to your website to understand? And so she went, oh, well, I'll have a look. And it turned out that 95% of the people landing on their site were looking for cleaners. And they didn't provide cleaners. So they immediately switched their business to providing cleaners. And within a very short period of time, they were moving thousands of cleaners all over London. And then the next piece of analysis they did on the work was, at what point did they need to start recruiting more cleaners? And there was a magic number. It was very finite. So it was around, if you had cleaners doing 38 hours a week, that was fine. And as soon as it slipped into 38.2, it was not fine, and that's when you had to start recruiting. And obviously that knowledge was gold dust to their business, and it really was gold dust, because within 48 months, they sold that business for 45 million. And that was based on an understanding of the data. The other thing about innovation, it's not about, as I say, widgets and about things. It is truly about people. And it's about finding the right people who can do amazing things with you. And there's a huge focus on where do we find people with the right kind of skills. And I feel that if you can do the third thing, which is building a culture within your company or organisation, which is truly inclusive and truly diverse, that's one way that you will help to solve the first two issues. Because a lot of sort of talent searching happens via the same routes. And if you want to find people, you need to fish in a different pond. You need to understand when you're looking for people, if say you want to make, improve the gender balance of your organisation or the diversity of your organisation, then make sure you actually analyse where you are placing your ads, and are they in places where that audience is going to actually see the ads, because so often people do the same old and are amazed that they get the same kind of results. This was the ad that got me my very first job on the telly. I was still a student at university. I was in the middle of my finals, so any kind of displacement activity was okay. And the reason I responded was because of just 3 words or 4 words. Would you be prepared to learn? That phrase made me answer that ad. I couldn't do any of these things. I certainly didn't think I was this kind of a person. And the very wise woman who placed that ad did it because they had looked in all sorts of places to find the 4th member of the swap shop team, and they hadn't found the right person. So rather than constantly going through the same agents, she just thought, well, let's just try something different. Most importantly, let's just try going down a route where people don't know what the job is. Let's see what happens there. And in fact, the lovely Rose, who, if you know who John Craven is, who's just to the right of Noel Edmonds, just to John Craven's left is Rose. And I always show her picture because I owe absolutely everything to that very forward-thinking woman who decided to fish in a different pool for her talent. The thing that sometimes gets forgotten, I think, is the impact that having a family can have. And I certainly found it really difficult. I imagined that things would just carry on. It would all be exactly the same. I'd be Wonder Woman. I'd be able to be the most amazing mom, live miles away from London, which I did, still be able to work 5 days a week on Tomorrow's World and film all over the world. And, guess what? This was very, very hard. And after about a year, I thought I needed my sanity, and I gave up Tomorrow's World. And that's when having sponsors as opposed to mentors became so important. Having those people who were in the room for me when opportunities arose at the BBC, because, you know, if you're not absolutely in front of people, people don't think of using you. So having those wonderful people who went, do you know what, why don't you try Maggie for this? Or Maggie would be good at that. They were really important. And I think companies do need to think about that retention of talent, because so much just evaporates. And I still see so many young women and young blokes actually as well, who are starting families, start to really reconsider where they're working, because it isn't going to fit in with their life. That is the wonderful Rose now. I'm leaving out all of the nightmare of her teenage years. I'm incredibly proud of her. She works in San Francisco for a tech company, but she says that nothing that she experienced at school helped her understand how much she would enjoy working in that environment and how good she would be at her job. And she was one of the reasons that made me want to start Teen Tech, because so often this was what kids fed back to me. They had no real idea of what it meant to work in the tech industry. And I just felt we could do so much more to connect them with real people, and most of all, connect them with their own potential to succeed. Because at the moment, and I think this is a really big issue with technology, that tech is developed by a very narrow subset of people for a very narrow subset of people. And only if we can really get diversity in terms of people who are developing technology will we be able to sort of really shift some of the major issues that we face in our world. And it's complicated helping young people understand, because it's not a quick fix. You can't just go and say, right, you know, this is an amazing industry, you need to be part of it. Young people need to not only understand what the opportunities might be, but believe that they could do it, and most importantly, believe that they might want to do it. And one of the big issues is that so much of I used to show this about 5 years ago, saying this is the future, and of course the future is very much here. And the difficulty with this is that you can't always point a camera at it. So whereas a young person might understand what it means to be a doctor or a vet or a lawyer, it's much harder for them to imagine, well, if you are working in virtual reality or if you are working in haptics, what do you actually do? And so the other thing that they need to understand is that, you know, there's so much focus on academic subjects at school, and, you know, I'm not trying to completely subvert the education system, but it's just the first hurdle. Those GCSEs, A-levels or whatever, that's the first hurdle. And these are the things that people recruit on. These are the things that really matter. And young people don't always understand that they already possess many of these qualities. So I was with a group of young kids in Brixton yesterday who we were doing some work with. They are certainly bold thinkers, and helping them understand that their bold view of the world and what they want to do in it is actually a really good thing. It might be, and I know, a complete nightmare for their teachers, but that bold thinking is what we need. And we've got an education system which encourages safe thinking. You know, if you jump through these hoops, you will get this grade. And obviously the schools want that, but we want people who think differently and who have got the guts to, and the determination and the resilience to develop an idea and take it forward. So we do a number of different initiatives, you know, for young people of different ages from the age of 8, because I think, you know, even when you're 7 or 8, you can start to eliminate yourself from certain areas because you think, oh, that's not for me, right the way through to 19. And we support the young people in different ways. And we gather data all the time. We've always done that, and that has helped us shape the programs. So no matter how much we all enjoy something, if it doesn't make for change, then we're not interested in carrying that forward. So we run large-scale events with between sort of, some events with 300 kids, sometimes with 500. They're all very hands-on. We measure their thinking at the beginning of the day. We measure their thinking at the end of the day. It's not a measles jab. All we can do with a one-day event is to change their perception of tech and to awaken their interest. And we then build on it in different ways. So we have a project called Teen Tech City of Tomorrow, where they develop the safer, kinder, smarter city of tomorrow. It's wonderful that when they do lots of very, very creative thinking. They look at how the smarter city might transform the lives of everyone within it. But when they come to build their model buildings, they make them out of recycled material. I was with 200 kids in Oldham last week as they built their model buildings. I cannot describe the level of mess because they'd all bought a good black carrier bag full of recycled bits and bobs from home. It was all over this hall floor. But the results that came out of it were absolutely wonderful. And they do think in a different kind of way. And they do think imaginatively and very, very creatively about the tech. And that's what it looks like. That's the sort of finished product in a classroom. But as I say, the level of mess that preceded that, you just can't imagine. There was an English teacher watching the kids as they were building this. And she said, oh my goodness me, she said, I'm just coming out in hives. I've never seen this amount of mess. But we don't mind mess. Mess is fine. And then for the older students, we have the Teen Tech Award programme, where they develop their own ideas. We connect them with leading people in tech all over the world from the moment that they first sign on, because too many initiatives, it's all about, going for what I call the low-hanging fruit and preaching to the converted. But I'm more interested in the kids who might not see themselves as having a career in tech or being interested. And then by developing ideas that they feel can make a difference with support, then it's amazing what the quality of the projects that they can work on and the kind of the journey you can take young people on. So for instance, the reason we were in that school in Brixton was because 3 of their students had come up with an amazing idea using virtual reality for a completely new concept of a comic book. And when we first saw that idea, it was very, very raw. But we connected the kids to the CTO of Disney, and he mentored them virtually over Skype. And he said he was absolutely humbled. So session 1, an hour, he sort of said, I suggest you do this. You may not have the skills to do this, but you could perhaps start doing a little bit of the programming. And he said he was absolutely floored that 5 weeks later, the kids had done that. And then they were moving on to the next stage of the project. And it was with real delight. I mean, I have nothing to do with the judging, that when they came to the Royal Society, along with 150 other kids, they won the Future of Entertainment category, and they are going to Buckingham Palace. And they are so proud, as they should be, and they are absolute little entrepreneurs. And they've now got all of the English sets in their school developing some of the storylines, because that was the thing that these boys struggled with, so they can crack on with the tech and the AR that they were interested in building into the comic. So, as I say, just connecting young people with those mentors. I mean, never underestimate what you can do for a young person, and particularly for young people who, as I say, it's not only that they don't see themselves as innovators, but their teachers may not see them as innovators, and maybe their parents, although they're supportive, may not understand about the careers of the future. The learning is wonderful, and it's also terrific to see the difference that you make not only to individual students but to whole schools. So great to see that the school in Brixton is now going to run our awards programme across the entire year. This student from Wales came to one of our events, and she was doing some digital reporting. And she came up to me during the day and she said, "Do you think I could work in this area?" And I said, "Well, there's absolutely no reason why you can't." And she was being mentored by someone from Cardiff University. And she said, "Oh, it's just that my teacher has told me that I'm going to work in a supermarket like everyone else, and I've just got to forget the idea of working in digital." And leaving aside the fact that that didn't really show that the teacher perhaps best understood what's happening in retail, it was very shocking. It was very shocking to sort of see that a kid's dreams have been trampled on like that. So we said, well, enter the Teen Tech Awards. She did. If I'm honest, when her project came in, we looked out for it. It wasn't at the same standard as the other students, but we do give some students wild cards. They never know they're a wild card. We felt that the experience would be really good for her to come to the Royal Society. And then the next year, I saw she'd entered again and was working with this bloke from Cardiff University, and I thought, oh, that's great, to see that she's still there. And I never forget sitting in that audience at the Royal Society, and when the winner of the digital journalism category was announced, it was her. And she went to Buckingham Palace, and that picture is taken of her there. And for me, this is what makes the whole project worthwhile. And as I was saying, you can change the thinking of a whole school. These girls are from a school in Greenock, and over a period of time, over 5 years, the teacher had always said that they noticed in the first year that what happened was the number of kids wanting to do the projects increased. They then embedded it in the curriculum. They noticed more kids wanting to do design and technology and then wanting to do engineering. And so we said, could you quantify that? And I'd got a figure in my head about the kind of difference we might be making. And she said, well, from when we started 5 years ago, the increase in students wanting to do science and tech subjects has been 300%. And it's because they can kind of see the point and they believe in it and they understand where it can take them. And this lad on the left, again, another boy from Wales, very much lacking in confidence. His teacher lacked belief in her students and didn't feel that perhaps they could really succeed. And to cut a very long story short, he developed an amazing project, and he went on to become Young Engineer of the Year and represented the UK in the States, which was lovely to see. And these girls became real beacons, not only in their school, but in their local community and then internationally. They went into local primary schools and talked about what they were doing. And I think one of the joyous moments that I heard from that was when apparently a little boy put his hand up and said, "Can boys do this too?" And then they said, oh, one of them was doing Spanish. And she said, oh, I just think it would be really good. I've been talking to they sort of had, they do Skype sessions with a school in Spain. They're really interested. Do you think they could do the Teen Tech Awards? And so thanks to those two students, we expanded the award programme to Spain, Finland, Hungary, and rather randomly, perhaps Colombia. And it's one of those things where, a really tiny thing. Neither of them were particularly interested in tech. And I always say it's a bit like being an ex-smoker. You can't wait to convert someone else, and that's just what those young girls were like. And Radio 1 presented them with a Teen Award of the Year at Wembley in front of 10,000 screaming teenagers. So the innovation is something that belongs to all of us. It belongs to the whole community. We can make, as I say, I'm a real optimist. We can make such a difference by working together and by being truly inclusive. And whether we're using data, whether our priority is, where do we get our, next programmer from, but we really need to make sure that we work with the widest community possible, because that's the only way we're ever going to change tomorrow's world. Thank you.
That was fantastic, wasn't it? Goodness. My daughter came to work with me today, and she was saying, "Tomorrow's World, what's that?" She's 10. And you were talking about all those different things that you were promoting, and all I could think of was a toaster that when it popped up, it had the weather on it. And that's the only thing I could remember from all of it. But no, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And I'm sure everybody's taken huge amounts of inspiration from that. And I'm no longer afraid of the word data. I think that's what I'm going to take home with me. Now, just to end today, I'd like to please put your hands together for the final time for Andy Begley, please.
Thank you very much. And going back to this morning's events, I'm still the warm-up artist for Kevin Lewis, so disappointment remains. Never to miss an opportunity. Maggie, please tell me that I didn't waste every Saturday morning and that the phone number was 018118055. That's a genuine sense of achievement for me, that it really is. I was. Can you not tell from the accent, Maggie? It's my great pleasure to close today's Tech 7 conference. From its seed conference a few months ago to the achievement of today, I think has been fantastic. In terms of today, from the start of what I can only describe as being an inspirational business breakfast that was hosted by our university colleagues, a wonderful event, 40 or 50 organisations there, some wonderful conversations started the day. It can only be described as an energetic day. I think the number of speakers that we've had, the variety of topics that we've covered, the kind of exhibitors that we've had at 3 different levels within the theatre, that sense of movement, that sense of energy has been palpable. I know I've not stopped, just conversation after conversation, such positive kind of vibes and energy about the place. Don't know if you saw in the bar area, I don't know how I ended up in the bar area, it's just sort of force of habit, but there's a lovely thing there where you can write a little note down and it will digitise it and you can see some of there, so I thought I'd scribble some of those down. Key words I found, inspirational, cutting edge, cool, fantastic words to describe this. Quite interesting one that said, "Now I've got a headache." You're only supposed to use 3 words. And I'm not certain what the headache was. But I think it's referring to just the blistering amount of information and the amount of stuff that's out there that they've been able to bring together to coalesce in this conference. I was asked at lunchtime around what the sort of opportunities that we think a conference like this creates. I think they're endless. They really are. This whole event almost stemmed from us searching out organisations and people who could help us change the way we deliver health and social care, change the way we look at housing, try to innovate in this area. We're forced into that innovation by the kind of budget constrictions we've got at the moment. By that, you've seen this in the national press and locally. But it's too good a crisis to waste. Let's use this to drive this kind of innovation and aspiration. I think, continuing with the Shun's words, collaboration is a massive piece for me here. What I found really, really interesting is that you've got such a diverse range of organisations, private and public sector organisations, who are willing to work together, who are willing to innovate. They don't keep their... It's not private, it's not I won't share this. This is actually working together to a common purpose. And that works so well, and it's been so evident today. So I think that's been such a positive for me. The bit I think I'd add to that, so it's all well and good having this collaboration, and it's all well and good at having this great view of data and technology, but there's something about we need to insert some sort of challenge there. I use the word disruptive quite a bit when we're talking about how we can change things, how we can reset an argument, how can we reset a problem in a different context. And I think that's what this is about. Let's not be afraid to disrupt the status quo. Let's understand what bits of technology, what bits of data analysis we can use in that different way that can disrupt our thinking, that can put wheels on suitcases, that we can plug these things together and create something of greater value than those individual pieces. I think the final point I'd like to leave you on is that all this stuff, if we're not careful, can be quite nebulous. It's very exciting, it's very interesting, it's very thought-provoking. But I think the challenge is, what are we doing with it? What can we do with it right here and now? I started the day by talking about it's all about Dave, and it's about understanding what this impact has on individuals. That's the key for me, on the outcomes for those individuals, for their lives, for their opportunities. So I think the challenge I'd like to leave you with is what's going to be different when we meet again. I've been told I must advertise Tech 17. This has been really successful this year. We've moved from a seed conference that was just on the single floor, if you remember. Now we've moved to we've filled the theatre for the full day. In 2019, we're looking that Tech 19 will be an even bigger event that will cross from the university campus through to the theatre and across the car park, and who knows where else. But I think when we meet again for that conference, I would like to see what difference we've made from today, what difference these conversations have made. So going back to looking at the impacts on individuals, on people. So that's the note I'd like to leave on today. I think it's been a celebration of an event. I've been really excited and enthused to meet so many different people. The kind of questions and conversations that have developed have been wonderful. And I think just leave with the challenge, let's make sure we make a difference. So I look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you.
And just with regard to that, we're going to be emailing out surveys to all the exhibitors and delegates and speakers to let you have your say on how you found it to make it bigger, better and more brilliant next year as well, which is going to be really exciting. I want to thank everybody that was part of today and also remind you that it is hashtag Tech7 or at Tech7, because those photos and those retweets and those likes, there will be 4 Amazon dots given away, Echo dots, and the winners are going to be on Friday. But the day's not over. Please network, please chat, please meet your heroes and talk to people that you've gone, oh, I'm a bit embarrassed, but yes, I'd really love to go up and get a photo. Go and talk to people and see the rest of the exhibits. And that is the wonderful Tech7 2018. Thank you.